Hey folks, Jason Wood up here, back with another episode of By Marketers for Marketers. This is actually part two of a two-part episode that I did with Marcel Santilli, SVP of Marketing at Upkeep. Hope you enjoy. Speaking of that, perfect transition. Like, what are the good roles? You know what I mean? To either start as a freelance or agency or keep, over there versus which are not. I'll start a little bit with a couple of these.
Yeah.
Like in my experience, and I'm gonna give a very ops focused answer, but like in my experience, the analysts, it's like the analysts, you almost can't afford to have external. And this guy could be completely biased on this, but it's because as an analyst, this is how I grew up, you start to recognize these patterns in the data. Even though you're using tools to look at the data, your brain, because you're an analyst, you just happen to get onto these patterns. You see this analysis, 2 weeks later, you do this analysis, and now you're connecting the dots in your mind. And then 4 weeks later, you're doing this and you're connecting the dots in your mind. And you just build up this really rich story in your mind that almost can't be described on paper, that I feel like is really hard to replicate with an agency or with a freelancer that doesn't have that skin in the game and that isn't spending all of their time kind of mired in your data. So that's my one, like, and almost maybe my one that I'm like, I would really want the analyst, almost need the analyst to be in-house to start from the start. But like, I don't know, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I think more from, my approach has been less like analyst and more of the person that is going to manage your systems of engagement and your systems of record. And hopefully that.
So is that like the ops person? Is that like the
exactly.
more senior ops kind of person?
Yeah. So at HashiCorp, what we did was we brought in actually a go-to-market systems admin person that was really like expert in Salesforce and, marketing automation. But then we couple that person with probably a top-notch data engineer, right? Which was my second hire in that go-to-market systems team that was supporting, I think at the time, almost 150 salespeople. So it's a pretty large organization already. And like you said, like when it comes to data and your systems and how you're setting everything up, it's so critical and it's such a bottleneck. You do not for me, I do not want to be not having anyone, especially when it comes to Salesforce, which can be a nightmare of cobbleweb of mistakes, if you will. You don't want to be hiring a company that's going to charge you $200 an hour and then probably offshore that. And they're paying, probably a fraction of that. And you can't even communicate with the person actually doing the work sometimes. And then they, you get this big bill. And at the end of it, your problem is not solved either because they're not thinking from an overall, like, what's your go-to-market motion? And how can I reflect that and help, marketing, sales, and customer success and finance do their jobs more effectively and more efficiently, right? I think that one is really critical. On the other hand, one that it's always been kind of interesting to me is kind of how you manage digital, right? So if you're not going to have this massive digital footprint, I always like to find very flexible partners, ideally agencies versus just one freelancer, but agencies that are small and flexible, right? That give you almost like extension of your team. They're in your Slack. They're they're using whatever project management tool you use, right? Jira, Asana, whatever, right? They're in your day-to-day and they're documenting things and they're setting things up, so that when you bring someone in, they have ideally like a good foundation.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like that. I think I've had luck. From an agency standpoint, I've had. I think the most luck probably with creative, creative agencies. And I think, but that's again, my limited experience with agencies. Cause like in ops worlds, I'm not usually using an agency. I'm usually, if I'm going to hire non-FTEs, it's probably going to be contractors. Oh, and that's what I was going to say actually earlier was that motion of hiring a full-time contractor first. That was my experience at Tableau. So even though at Tableau we were growing like crazy, what was interesting there is that the more important number was the percent of the total marketing budget that was for headcount versus the percent that was for what we called working dollars. And apparently, when you're a public company, that ratio actually makes a huge difference. And maybe this is why like the Microsofts and the HPs maybe do it this way. Because you're like, oh, your burdened headcount dollars as a percent of your revenue is too high. So let's just go hire a bunch of contingent workers. And so that was how I did it at Tableau. I wanted them to be full-time because I was in ops and leading ops, but I'd have to hire them first as a full-time contractor, kind of give them I'd be honest, like, hey, I don't know if my goal is to turn this into a full-time position when I can, but I don't know if I'll be able to. Yeah. So it's an interesting way of like, it's almost like understanding, like you were saying, the context of where you're at and then doing the best that you can, within that context. Yeah.
And one thing that's worked for me too, that's a little bit of a hack, if you will. There are agencies out there or companies out there that they specialize in like contractors. And not only that, they'll W-2 them for you. So they'll get benefits, they'll get all that. And so depending on the person you're hiring, if benefits and being W-2 is important to them, you can overcome that pretty easily,
And it's just for like an agreed upon markup or something like that, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And usually it's actually what I found is that they're not going to be that much higher than whatever your cost of employment is already. And so it ends up sometimes even costing you less overall than your cost of employment, and so that's been a little bit of a little hack there that's been super helpful. And then I do a lot of the sourcing myself as well. I get a LinkedIn Recruiter Lite license, and then I'll in-mail, 100 people for every 10 conversations I have. And then of those, usually you get like one really good person,
Yeah. Cool. Okay. So we've hired a couple people now. We're kind of off and running, but we still need some fun tools, right, to help us scale. So let's talk a little bit about some of the tools that we use, or maybe even some of the processes that we use to kind of help ourselves scale. So I'll start with one or a couple. The one that honestly, this is kind of funny because it's ridiculous, but Canva, honestly, for me, it's probably like the kindergartners Photoshop. People listening are probably like, what are you talking about? But like Canva has opened up, because I've always said, like, I'm not creative. Like, I don't know. I know what I like when I look at it, but I cannot create something, you know what I mean? I have to replicate something. I have to look at something, I'm not. But Canva is actually, I think it's giving me more confidence that like, I can get somewhere, I can get close, you know what I mean? So that's one. And then another interesting one I use is called Phantom Buster. And that's one that I use to automate some of like my LinkedIn actions, and so a big part of what I'm trying to do is associate my personal brand, whatever it is, with the company.
Yeah.
Because my personal brand speaks to a lot of things that, the product is known for, like my ops background and everything I've learned, like about ROI, and efficiency and optimization, like our platform speaks to it. So I'm like, let's tie those together. So I use it, I connect with people, and I basically use it to connect with people and to automate that, because it's just too hard for me to like go out and find all these demand gen people, like connect with them, see my content.
So
that's a nice one too. What's that?
That's actually how I found out about metadata. It was, you posted something on LinkedIn, and I can't remember if we were already connected or someone that I was connected to liked your post. And then I read through and then clicked through the link to Metadata's website. I was like, oh, this is actually exactly what I needed. We had just like let go of like not a great agency that was charging us a lot for doing very little with our paid media. And I was like, this is actually going to help solve a lot of things. And so funny enough, it's working,
Good. Yeah.
But I'm pretty bad at that. So I've been slacking for a while of like, it's just like, if anything gives, it's like, okay, I'm not going to do a post anywhere. It's like,
hard. Yeah. And I'm the kind of person that like, I can't manufacture something into a post. You know what I mean? Like I have all this experience and sometimes I'm sitting there like, what the fuck do I write? And I'm like, well, then don't write anything. Like if you don't know, then don't, just don't do it. And so, so I get
like, I like this format because of this, right? Like I feel like forcing myself in it. And I think it's also discipline. I just need more discipline for that, but just forcing myself of just posting it. But then I don't know, maybe I'm a little bit cynical, but I feel like marketers ruin a lot of things. And so I feel like they're starting to ruin LinkedIn now too. And
Yeah.
LinkedIn
Some
was
people
such
are
a good
posting like
filter.
they feel like this obligation of like to post every day. I'm just like, and there's just so much echo chambering going on.
Yeah.
That's what I don't like is like,
Yeah,
but
it's
then
like,
every once in a while you get some good
if
stuff.
you're Bill Gates, maybe I want to hear from you once a week. But if you're, a really successful marketer, I don't know. I just don't see
Right.
you having that much knowledge that I need to hear from you 3 times a day, but
Exactly. And do you know, is there enough to even say? Like some of the bigger people I notice, like you see recycled content like way too frequently because it's like, you're posting too much. It's the same
exactly.
stuff. Yeah.
I'm an audiobook guy, by the way. I'm just like, I consume so many audiobooks.
Nice.
And it's just, I don't know, it's just, I love taking walks, especially now, and just like listening to audiobooks. And I feel like,
Are you fiction or nonfiction?
funny enough, I'm like 100% business related or work
Oh,
related.
wow. Nice.
I know, it's kind of crazy. I just enjoy it so much, Yeah.
I am the worst reader. I am like, I'm the worst reader. I don't know. I'm just a little aside. Like I also can't binge watch something. Like my wife is like, oh, they found this great new show. I'm like,
I
I'll
wish I
get
had
two
that
in. I'm
problem.
like that. I can't do it. I get,
I really wish I
so
had that problem.
I gotta wait 3 or 4 more days until I can do another one, and she's like, come
Yeah.
on. So she
I
left
feel
me
like that's one of
behind.
those that tell me a weakness, but it's really a strength, and you're putting it as a weakness. That's one of those.
That's funny.
But
Oh man.
yeah.
Yeah. Nice. So tools you've used,
Yeah.
tools you use, processes that you use to help you out.
So plus one
do?
on Canva. Canva is awesome. I am actually a Photoshop geek.
Oh,
So
nice.
in high school, I took this kind of webmaster class, and a friend
Mm.
said, "Hey, you should check out Photoshop." And then I was like, I think it was Photoshop version 5 at the time. Like it was,
Nice.
like a while back. And but I've always been a geek and love design, and I almost went to school for design, but then I learned very quickly that, didn't want to get people that weren't good at design telling me how to do design. So I said, you know what, let me go be on the client side. But I digress. And I think one, or actually two different ones. Upwork has been something that I've used for a long time. Since the company went public, I feel like there's some things I'm like not in love with, but it's still like a great place to find talent very quickly. So the person
the guy that's going to edit this video I found on Upwork. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, and like I'll give you an example. The person that interacts a lot with metadata that manages our paid media. It was funny. I went from, hey, I got to find someone, to I wrote a one short paragraph, posted on Upwork, found 3 people that same day, interview all 3 of them that same day, gave 2 of them an assignment overnight, didn't give them a lot of time intentionally, and then connected with them again on a Friday. And then by Monday, that person started, and they've been doing amazing the last 3 months.
Yeah.
So it was like 48 hours from I got to do this to this person is productive in Slack, getting work done and productive. However, there is another one that I've been using. It's actually a startup. So I'll do a little plug here because I really enjoy meeting the CEO. It's called stoketalent.com. And so they're really interesting
I like the
because
name.
yeah, Upwork just charges you so much fees. So if you have the talent already, and you have people that you've been working with, and you built some relationship, they are really good at. They have almost no fee, and they're really good about managing. For us too, we do a lot of paid contributors for like articles that come from experts. So we're paying people a few $100 here and there, and you don't want to do like an invoice and then your finance team takes maybe 30 days a day and all of that good stuff, right? Like you want people to just manage everything in one place without being charged, 15, 20%.
So they handle all the like contract, paperwork, all that stuff. You're just like, hey, just go register here. I'm going to send you like an invite or something, or
yeah. And then what they do is like, they'll invoice your company and then you pay after the fact. So it's almost like they're fronting it a little bit. And their fees are pretty low, and the freelancers, contractors, or vendors get paid super quickly too, which is huge.
That's nice too. I know like my Upwork guy is like, man, the fees. You know what I mean? I was like, okay, I'll pay you a little bit more.
Exactly.
To account for it.
That's the thing. You want to, these people are doing amazing work.
Yeah.
You don't want to, especially if you found the talent or is a talent that you've been using for a while. It's just like, you want them to get more benefit from the work that they're doing. I have another one that I actually got into quite a bit this year. I feel like email templating is, prior to this year was the thing I hated the most. And every single job was like, nobody owns it. Nobody's good at it. The marketing ops person is not good at it. Like the engine
Are you talking
person.
about like actual visual template, like a visual email template kind of? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. So there's this
Oh,
tool
okay. Yeah.
called Strippo.email.
Huh.
Super cheap and amazing. And they have some templates too, but and the reason I like them, I know a lot of the marketing automation tools have a builder, but
Right.
this gives you a lot more things that you can do, especially on the mobile responsive and adapting to a lot of the different email clients and whatnot.
Yep.
And so
Yep.
that has probably saved me and my team hundreds, if not thousands of hours this year.
Wow.
And our templates look super clean. So between Canva and that, our emails look beautiful, like super, super clean.
Nice.
And then
Nice.
I'm
That's
huge
cool.
also on just documentation and documenting everything and writing things down. And so I've always used Confluence from Atlassian. There's a bunch of other tools out there, but it's just pick something that is very easy to search. And that's the main thing. I love Google Drive, like Google Docs. It's great, but nobody knows what's out there. They don't know what to search in order to find the document,
Yeah.
So Confluence has just been life-changing for us, and Asana as well, just being able to kind of manage everything. Anyways, I can go on and on, so I'll just stop.
No, yeah, I use Asana as well. It's funny because I worked at Workfront, before here, and I love those guys. And like, granted, they just sold to Adobe for 1.5 billion, so good for them.
There's something right.
But it was like impossible tool to use. It wasn't made for us. You know what I mean? It wasn't made for us. It was made for much bigger, like marketing teams and stuff like that. But even for those, like, tough to use, And Asana, like, I love it. It's just so easy to use. I honestly love the aesthetic of it too. You know what I mean?
They make it
I like looking at it.
Mess it up almost,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
I feel like Jira is a great tool, for example, but it's so easy for people to mess it up, right? Because it's so complex and you can do so much with it. It's so powerful, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like Asana, it's like, yes, like 90% of the time you're like, oh, I wish this thing was here. But it's still like very pleasant to use. And I think they've done a really awesome job. Actually, another one that for things that are more complex that Asana doesn't really solve, Airtable. Airtable has been for me. Like Airtable is life-changing.
Yeah. I've seen some amazing uses of Airtable. I've not gotten one myself, but I've seen it. Yeah.
I love it. It's a database meets Google Sheets meets, a bunch of other things, and it's very visual. So we're actually using that for all our like content workflow, from like ideation to handing out assignments to, publishing. And it's just kind of a relational database almost, right? So it's so powerful, so visual. And then the other one too, and I'm like just doing all these plugs for all these companies, is Miro. Miro has been life-changing because I'm a whiteboarding person, and I got my whole team on Miro now, and I have everything you can imagine,
That's cool. Yeah. Yeah. There's so many out there. You know what I mean? Like, I was just thinking of another one too. Like, I use it called Shield app. And that's a tool I use to just connect to my LinkedIn profile, right? And it gives me all these stats and all these, just all this analytics about my posts and the engagement on those posts, and how many people liked it, commented. And it's kind of nice if you're trying to make some kind of a presence, you know what I mean, on LinkedIn, so you can just get a sense of like, oh, which of my posts are actually the most engaging, or that kind of thing. And so I look at that probably once a month just to get a sense of like, what I notice is like
on some of these things is I see a lot more companies doing this kind of product-led growth approach. But what's interesting with Airtable, with Miro, is they have all Confluence and a bunch of others, even Asana now. They have templates, right? And I think it's just a great way to kind of do something that is a little bit of marketing, a little bit of user-generated content, a little bit of fast forwarding your realizing value of that product, and kind of creating a little bit of network effects too, right? Because it's like the expertise and the things all your customers are building, you're packaging them up to speed up people's adoption of your product. So it's like, I love companies that are starting to do that, and just, Canva and all these companies that use content to speed up the things we need to all do versus starting from scratch every time,
Yeah. And, and that's a hard transition to make. We're in the middle of that right now. Right. So like when I started this job my ultimate goal was kind of like what you were, I think we were talking about earlier, maybe just personally, was ultimately I want to drive as many organic hand raisers as possible with whatever it is I do. I don't, it's going to be a mix of the organic stuff I'm doing and the content I'm doing on LinkedIn. It's going to be the blogs. It's going to be us writing specifically for SEO. It's going to be thought leadership. It's going to be, but what I want is I want that to be our primary motion, because once you get that, you've got the fit, right? You know what I mean? And it becomes predictable. It takes time to get to that point, but it becomes more of a predictable engine. And that's where kind of I'm at right now, right? So when you're starting out, sometimes you got to spend a lot of money, right? You got to spend some money to try and like get the engine going. And luckily for us, I was able to find an arbitrage channel with conversation ads. So like where I could actually make my budget hit our goals, which gives you a little bit of space to like, okay, now I'm going to try and get this other engine running. And so, and I'm assuming that in your experience, that's the engine that actually is once you reach that point where it's like, and I don't know, is it a majority of your demos are going to come organically, or like, where do you get to the point where you're like, all right, I feel good that I've got enough, I guess it's awareness and conversation and kind of networking going on out there where it's driving people to the site and they're converting. I've got enough content.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty dialed in on the paid ad side, and what I'm getting for that. How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think, again, it goes back to, it's not one size kind of fits all, because, all, like Google and all these companies, they're making it to where virtually like you have to spend money, because even if you're ranked number one, in some cases, like you can see like 4 or 5 ads before they get to you. So you're still going to miss out on a lot. So it just depends on how aggressive you want to be about kind of renting versus earning people's attention, right? But for example, at HashiCorp, obviously we had the advantage of being open source. So there's a ton of network effects there. It's kind of a bottoms up adoption. And so like our top down motion was, very much sustained by that. But we got to pretty much, close to 100 million in ARR without a single ad ever. So it's kind of crazy. I really try. They were like, we don't want to do retargeting. We don't want to do this. And I was like, all right, cool. It's working. So it's fine. So I went like super heavy on content there. And previously I really went heavy on content, but I think if you can couple that with a really smart strategy with paid, I like to think of paid as almost throwing fuel at a fire that already exists, as opposed to igniting a fire that's non-existent, and then you're just wasting a bunch of fuel, right? That there's nothing there, right, to kind of light it up, if you will.
I've got an interesting question for you. So back at HashiCorp, and then I know this conversation go forever.
I know. I just look at the
we'll wrap it up real quick. I know. I was like, oh shit. Hopefully, it doesn't have a hard stop. So at HashiCorp, real quick. So the budget that you had, right? So it sounded like everybody was already in agreement, like content is the way to go. So the budget that you had, do you think you could have hit your goals by putting that budget primarily in paid media? Or was it really out of necessity that it was like, hey, I don't quite have enough, so I need to put it into content? Or was it a third maybe, which is like, I actually have more than enough, but I could do all that all day in paid, but I know the right way is content. So I'm going to pay more actually right now to get that content engine running, because I know that's going to work out better in the long run.
Probably all of the above. But I think part of it is, so HashiCorp is very unique in the sense that at the time, now there's even more, there's 6 open source projects. And so we were managing quite a bit of different websites, my team. And so we had to build a pretty large footprint. And so we're managing, I think, 12 websites at the time, and about 7 million visitors a month, about 50 million downloads to open source projects a year. And so volume and awareness wasn't really the kind of the issue, or leads, right? Like everybody was kind of hand raisers, because you're running open source in production. So it's like, hey, all our critical infrastructure depends on this. We should probably write them a check to make sure if something goes down, like we have someone to call, right? And so it was different in that way. And we went very heavy. So if you have a technical product and adoption is really important, or you have a freemium it's really, really important to think about adoption and helping people be successful with either the free version or your open source version. And so we partner with, credit to obviously the founder and the leadership team on building an education team. So the digital team partnered with the education team, and we launched learn.hashicorp.com, which has been really successful. And then one of the things we did was just creating a ton of content, like video content. We produced almost 200 videos in less than a year ourselves. And then we had all our conferences. So I think we produced almost total 500 to 600 resources in our resource library. And all of that with very little additional budget than what we were already doing. But to answer your question, I do think that if we were using some paid media budget to be more strategic about, getting in front of certain people, it could have sped up the process. But I think at the same time, it also didn't make sense because we couldn't hire salespeople fast enough. And so that was the biggest bottleneck. Right. So even if you did get more, it's like pipeline wasn't a problem, leads weren't a problem, like awareness wasn't a problem. It was more, there's not enough salespeople to sell these very complex deals, And
Boy,
so
how many of us would like to be in that problem? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, it's like when your magic number is very high and you keep like hiring, and your magic number doesn't go down. You're just like, okay, we don't need more fuel in the fire right now. Right.
Cool. Well, awesome. Like I said, we could go on and on, but I'll wrap this up for time for listeners' sake. But Marcel, thanks again for joining me today. I really appreciate it. This is a great conversation. And anything to tie it up?
No, really enjoyed our conversation. I'm a huge fan of metadata, and I'll do a plug for metadata. It's been a huge help for us, and I've been just telling so many people about it. But every time I do, I kind of feel a little bit guilty because it's one of those things that it's like you're talking about conversation ads when you find something good and you're just like, man, I really want them to be successful, but I also kind of wanted it to be a secret because it's my secret weapon right now, Nice. But definitely people should check metadata out. We've been really enjoying being a customer, and thank you for having me on. Awesome. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Marcel. And hey, thanks everybody for listening, watching again. And we'll be back in another couple of weeks with another episode. All right. Thanks so much.